Captain Jake Morrison walked across the bridge of the UES Defiant and felt the metal deck plates vibrate under his boots. The ship was different from every other vessel in human space, and Jake knew it. Where other ships hummed quietly with energy systems, the Defiant rumbled like an old freight train. The bridge smelled of hot metal and ozone instead of the clean, recycled air most spacers were used to. Lisa Bryant looked up from her engineering station and wiped grease from her hands with a dirty rag. She had been working on the ship for 3 years now and still found new problems every day. The Defiant was part human technology and part alien salvage welded together in ways that made no sense to anyone except Lisa and her team. The ship looked like someone had taken a human battleship and covered it with armor plates stolen from 6 different alien races. Jake stared out at the stars through the main viewer and wondered what the aliens thought when they saw his ship. Most galactic vessels were smooth and elegant with curves that flowed like water. The Defiant looked like a flying brick covered in gun barrels and sensor arrays. The ship had been built to fight, and everything about it said so. The communications officer turned in his chair and spoke to Jake with excitement in his voice. Lieutenant Danny Shaw had been monitoring long-range sensors for hours and finally had something to report. A large fleet of ships was moving toward human space from the direction of the Zephyrian Empire. The readings showed at least 50 vessels, moving in tight formation. Jake felt his stomach tighten as he looked at the sensor data. The Zephyrians had been threatening human colonies for months, but this was the first time they had sent a real battle fleet. Their ships were fast and deadly, with plasma weapons that could slice through most armor like butter. Worse yet, they fought in swarms that overwhelmed enemy vessels with sheer numbers. Lisa stood up from her station and walked over to Jake with a worried expression on her face. She had studied Zephyrian technology and knew how dangerous they could be. Their weapons were designed to work together in perfect harmony, while their ships moved like dancers in space. Each vessel supported the others in a way that made the whole fleet stronger than its parts. The tactical display showed the alien ships moving in patterns that hurt to look at. They twisted and turned through space like living things while maintaining perfect formation. Jake had seen recordings of Zephyrian battles and knew that few species could stand against them in open combat. The insects had conquered half the galaxy using these same tactics. Admiral Kate Phillips appeared on the main screen with orders for all human ships to fall back to defensive positions around Earth. Her face was calm, but Jake could see the worry in her eyes. The human fleet was small compared to what the Zephyrians could field, and most of their ships were not designed for the kind of fighting that was coming. After the Admiral signed off, Jake received a private message on his personal terminal. The orders were classified and came directly from Fleet Command. The Defiant was to intercept a small group of Zephyrian scouts that had separated from the main fleet. This would be the first real test of the ship in actual combat against alien vessels. Jake called his senior officers together in the briefing room and explained the mission. They would be facing 5 Zephyrian scout ships that were moving ahead of the main fleet. The enemy vessels were smaller than the Defiant, but much faster and more maneuverable. They carried enough firepower to destroy most human ships if they got close enough. Lisa pulled up the technical specifications for Zephyrian scout vessels on the briefing room display. The ships were built for speed and carried plasma cannons that could fire in multiple directions at once. Their armor was light, but their shields could deflect most energy weapons. They usually worked together to surround larger ships and attack. From all sides, Danny Shaw had been studying Zephyrian communications and tactics for months. He explained that the aliens coordinated their attacks using complex signal patterns that allowed them to move as one unit. Each ship knew exactly where the others were at all times and could respond to threats in perfect synchronization. The briefing lasted for 2 hours, as the officers went over every detail of the coming battle. Jake wanted his crew to understand what they were up against and how the Defiant would fight differently than other human ships. The Battlecruiser was built to take punishment and dish it out in return rather than trying to outmaneuver the enemy. As the crew prepared for battle, Jake walked through the ship and checked on his people. The Defiant carried a crew of 800 men and women who had volunteered for this experimental mission. Many of them were veterans of previous encounters with alien races, but none had faced the Zephyrians in direct combat before. The engine room thrummed with power as Lisa and her Team made final adjustments to the ship systems. The Defiant used a hybrid power plant that combined human fusion reactors with alien energy converters. The result was a ship that could generate more power than vessels twice its size, but at the cost of complexity that gave Lisa headaches. In the weapons bay, the gunners checked their railguns and missile launchers for the 10th time. The Defiant carried kinetic weapons instead of the energy systems preferred by most spacefaring races. The ship could throw chunks of metal at significant fractions of light speed or launch missiles with warheads designed to penetrate alien armor. Jake returned to the bridge as the ship approached the intercept point. The Zephyrian scouts appeared on sensors as 5 bright dots moving in a complex weaving pattern. They had detected the Defiant and were adjusting their formation to surround the human vessel. Jake could see they planned to use their standard tactics of coordinated attacks from multiple angles. Lisa reported that all systems were ready for combat. The ship armor was charged and the weapons were online. The Defiant might look like a collection of spare parts, but it was ready to prove that human engineering could stand up to alien technology. Jake took his seat in the captain chair and gave the order to engage the enemy. The battle was about to begin, and with it, humanity would learn whether their approach to warfare could compete with species that had been fighting in space for thousands of years. Commander Ryan Cole sat at his tactical station and watched the data streams flowing across his screens. The battle with the Zephyrian scouts had ended 6 hours ago, and Ryan was still analyzing every second of the engagement. What he found in the combat records made him call Captain Morrison immediately. Jake arrived at the tactical station and looked over Ryan's shoulder at the displays. The screens showed movement patterns and weapon signatures from the alien ships during their fight. Ryan pointed to a series of mathematical curves that appeared again and again in the data. The Zephyrian vessels had moved in formations that followed precise geometric patterns. Ryan explained that the alien coordination was not as random as it appeared. The scout ships had used movement algorithms based on mathematical formulas that allowed them to maintain perfect spacing while attacking from multiple directions. The patterns were complex, but they repeated in predictable ways that human computers could learn to recognize. Jake felt excitement building as he understood what Ryan was showing him. If the Zephyrian tactics followed mathematical rules, then human battle computers could predict where the alien ships would be seconds before they got there. This kind of predictive capability would give human gunners a huge advantage in future encounters. Lisa Bryant joined them at the tactical station after finishing repairs to the ship systems. She had been working on integrating alien technology into human computers for years and knew the possibilities better than anyone. The pattern recognition software that Ryan had discovered could be adapted to work in real time during combat operations. Lieutenant Amy Foster called from the communication station with news that made everyone stop what they were doing. She had been listening to intercepted Zephyrian transmissions since the battle and had made a breakthrough in understanding their tactical communications. The aliens were not using traditional radio signals to coordinate their attacks. Amy explained that Zephyrian battle coordination relied on biological signals translated into digital format. The insect aliens communicated through pheromone releases that were converted into electronic messages and transmitted between ships. This biological basis made their coordination incredibly fast, but also created vulnerabilities that human technology could exploit. Jake realized that Amy had found something that could change everything. If human ships could jam or interfere with Zephyrian biological communications, then their perfect coordination would break down. The alien advantage of fighting as a unified swarm would disappear and leave individual ships vulnerable to human firepower. Ryan began running simulations. Based on the new information, he fed the movement patterns and communication data into the ship computer and created virtual battles between human and Zephyrian forces. The results showed that jamming alien communications while using pattern prediction could give human ships victory ratios of 3-to-1 or better. Back on Earth, Dr. Peter Grant received the combat data from the Defiant and immediately understood its importance. Peter led a team of scientists who studied alien biology and military tactics for Fleet Command. The discovery that Zephyrian coordination could be predicted and disrupted was exactly the breakthrough that humanity needed. Peter assembled his best researchers and began developing countermeasures based on the Defiant's findings. The team included xenobiologists who understood alien physiology, and computer specialists who could create jamming systems. Working around the clock, they began designing equipment that could turn Zephyrian strengths into weaknesses. The research team discovered that human unpredictability was actually a major advantage in galactic warfare. Most alien species had evolved to fight with rigid tactical doctrines that remained unchanged for thousands of years. Humans were different because they adapted and improvised based on changing conditions during battle. Dr. Grant's team found that human creativity extended beyond just tactics. Human engineers had a talent for combining technologies from different sources in ways that their original designers never intended. This ability to create hybrid systems gave human ships capabilities that surprised even their own crews. Meanwhile, in Zephyrian space, Hive General Zakth received reports of the scout ship losses with growing alarm. The insects had lost an entire reconnaissance wing to a single human vessel, and the survivors brought back disturbing tactical data. The human ship had fought in ways that made no sense according to established galactic warfare principles. War Admiral Thisera was summoned to discuss the human threat with the Hive General. Thisera commanded one of the largest battle fleets in Zephyrian space with over 200 ships under her control. She had never lost a major engagement and considered human military technology to be primitive compared to alien systems. The tactical briefing showed that the human Battlecruiser had used brute force tactics combined with electronic warfare in ways that confused Zephyrian battle computers. Instead of trying to outmaneuver the scout ships, the human vessel had absorbed their attacks while delivering devastating counterfire that overwhelmed alien defenses. Hive General Zakth ordered War Admiral Thisera to eliminate the human threat before it could spread to other species. The Zephyrians had built their empire by maintaining technological and tactical superiority over other races. If humans could develop effective countermeasures, then other species might follow their example. Thisera began preparing her battle fleet for deployment against human space. She selected her most experienced ship commanders and equipped them with the latest Zephyrian weapons and defensive systems. The force that would attack humanity represented the cream of the insect military with enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. On the Defiant, Amy Foster continued her work on Zephyrian communications. She had discovered that the biological basis of alien coordination created opportunities for psychological warfare as well as electronic jamming. Human computers could generate false pheromone signals that would confuse insect battle instincts. Lisa Bryant worked with Amy to develop hardware that could broadcast disruption signals on the frequencies used by Zephyrian biological communications. The system was experimental, but tests showed it could create enough interference to break down alien coordination for several minutes at a time. Ryan Cole integrated the new jamming system with his predictive targeting computers. The combination would allow human ships to disrupt alien formations while using pattern recognition to target individual vessels with precision fire. The tactical advantage would be enormous if the systems worked as designed. Jake Morrison studied the reports coming in from other human colonies and outposts. Zephyrian activity was increasing throughout human space as the aliens prepared for a major offensive. Long-range sensors detected large fleet movements heading toward human territory from multiple directions. Admiral Kate Phillips contacted the Defiant with new orders. The experimental battlecruiser would join the main human battle fleet at Kepler Station, where intelligence indicated the Zephyrians would make their primary attack. The station was a critical supply hub that humanity could not afford to lose. Jake knew that the coming battle would test everything his crew had learned about fighting alien forces. The Defiant had proven itself against a small scout force, but War Admiral Thisera was bringing hundreds of ships equipped with the most advanced weapons in Zephyrian space. The outcome would determine whether humanity survived as an independent species. The ship began its journey toward Kepler Station while the crew made final preparations for the largest battle in human history. Lisa checked every system twice while Amy tested her communication warfare equipment. Ryan ran constant simulations trying to predict how the new tactics would work against a full Zephyrian battle fleet. Jake stood on the bridge watching the stars streak past as the Defiant traveled through hyperspace. In a few days, his ship would face impossible odds against an enemy that had conquered half the galaxy. The only advantages humanity possessed were creativity, adaptability, and the willingness to try tactics that other species considered impossible. War Admiral Tysera emerged from hyperspace near Kepler Station with 200 of the finest ships in the Zephyrian fleet. Her flagship, the Stinger of Worlds, was a massive dreadnought that had never lost a battle in 50 years of service. Around her moved cruisers, destroyers, and fighters in perfect formation like a deadly dance performed in the vacuum of space. The Zephyrian commander studied the human defensive positions through her battle computer displays. Admiral Kate Phillips had positioned the human fleet between the alien armada and Kepler Station using traditional defensive tactics. 43 human ships faced 200 Zephyrian vessels in what appeared to be a hopeless mismatch. Tysera felt contempt for the humans as she analyzed their formation. The alien commander had expected more creativity from a species that had managed to defeat her scout ships. Instead, the humans appeared to be using standard defensive positions that any competent military academy would teach. The battle would be over within hours. Admiral Phillips stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Valiant, and watched the Zephyrian fleet deploy into attack formation. She knew that conventional tactics would result in the complete destruction of her forces within minutes. That was why she had ordered Captain Morrison to implement Protocol Chaos as soon as the battle began. Jake Morrison received the coded signal from Admiral Phillips and turned to his bridge crew. Protocol Chaos was a battle plan that went against everything taught in military academies throughout the galaxy. Instead of fighting as a coordinated fleet, each human ship would operate independently while maintaining hidden coordination through quantum-encrypted channels. Lisa Bryant powered up the experimental systems that would make Protocol Chaos possible. The Defiant and every other human ship carried quantum communicators that could transmit orders instantly across any distance without being detected by alien sensors. Each captain would appear to be acting randomly while actually following a complex overall strategy. Ryan Cole activated his pattern prediction computers and began feeding targeting data to the entire human fleet through the quantum network. His analysis of Zephyrian tactics during the scout ship battle had been programmed into every human battle computer. The aliens would face an enemy that could predict their movements before they made them. Amy Foster began broadcasting false signals on Zephyrian biological communication frequencies. Her jamming system sent conflicting pheromone commands to the alien fleet while making it appear that the interference was coming from natural space phenomena. The insects would find their perfect coordination becoming increasingly unreliable. War Admiral Tysera gave the order to attack and watched her fleet move into the classic death spiral formation. 200 ships would surround the human force and close in from all directions while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. No enemy had ever survived the death spiral when executed by a full Zephyrian battle fleet. The human ships scattered in all directions as the aliens began their attack. To Tysera, it looked like panic as human captains abandoned formation and fled in random directions. She ordered her fleet to pursue and destroy the fleeing vessels before they could escape to hyperspace. The battle computer predicted complete victory within 30 minutes. Jake Morrison watched his tactical display as Protocol Chaos began to work exactly as planned. The human ships appeared to be fleeing in panic, but they were actually moving to predetermined positions calculated by Ryan's computers. Each vessel would be perfectly placed to exploit weaknesses in the Zephyrian formation when the aliens committed fully to their death spiral. The Defiant led the seemingly chaotic retreat while broadcasting false sensor signatures that made single, human ships appear as entire squadrons. Lisa's modifications to the ship systems created ghost images that confused Zephyrian targeting computers. The aliens found themselves shooting at targets that did not exist while missing the real human. Vessels Amy's communication warfare reached full effectiveness as the Zephyrian fleet closed in. False orders on biological frequencies caused alien ships to break formation at critical moments. Some vessels received commands to attack targets that were not there, while others were told to defend positions that had already been abandoned. War Admiral Tysera began to realize that something was wrong when her fleet coordination started breaking down. Ships that should have been supporting each other were instead getting in each other's way. Weapons fire that should have been precisely coordinated became scattered and ineffective. The moment came when Ryan Cole's computers detected that the Zephyrian death spiral had reached the point of no return. The alien ships were committed to their formation and could not change course without colliding with each other. Admiral Phillips received the signal and ordered all human vessels to execute the second phase of Protocol Chaos. Every human ship suddenly changed direction and accelerated toward predetermined attack positions. The scattered retreat became a coordinated assault as 43 vessels converged on the Zephyrian fleet from angles that the aliens had never anticipated. The death spiral formation that was supposed to be unbeatable became a trap for the insects themselves. Jake Morrison felt the defiant shudder as Lisa pushed the engines beyond their design limits. The battlecruiser charged directly toward the center of the Zephyrian formation, while its railguns opened fire on targets selected by Ryan's predictive computers. Kinetic projectiles traveling at tremendous velocity punched through alien shields and armor like they were made of paper. The human attack caught the Zephyrians completely unprepared. Their ships were positioned to fire outward at fleeing enemies, not inward at attackers coming from multiple directions. Alien vessels found themselves unable to bring their weapons to bear, while human ships poured devastating fire into their formations. Amy Foster's jamming system reached peak effectiveness as the battle intensified. Zephyrian ships received conflicting biological commands that caused them to fire on their own vessels or abandon defensive positions at critical moments. The perfect coordination that made the insect fleet deadly became a weakness that humans exploited ruthlessly. Lisa Bryant reported that the Defiant's hybrid weapon systems were performing beyond expectations. The combination of human railguns and alien energy converters allowed the ship to maintain a rate of fire that overwhelmed Zephyrian defensive computers. Enemy vessels simply could not process the incoming threats fast enough to mount effective countermeasures. War Admiral Thysera watched in horror as her supposedly invincible fleet began to fall apart. Ships that had fought together for decades suddenly could not coordinate their actions. Vessels that should have been supporting each other were instead creating gaps that human attackers exploited with devastating effectiveness. The battle turned into a massacre as human ships used their unpredictable tactics to destroy Zephyrian vessels faster than the aliens could react. Ryan Cole's pattern prediction allowed human gunners to target weak points in alien defenses with surgical precision. Ships that had seemed invulnerable moments before exploded under concentrated human fire. Jake Morrison ordered the Defiant to close with the Zephyrian flagship as the battle reached its climax. The Stinger of Worlds was the most powerful ship in the alien fleet, but it was designed to fight enemies that followed traditional tactics. Against an opponent that ignored the rules of galactic warfare, the Dreadnought's advantages became meaningless. The Defiant and the Stinger of Worlds exchanged fire at point-blank range while smaller ships battled around them. Lisa's armor modifications allowed the human battlecruiser to absorb hits that would have destroyed most vessels, while its weapons carved deep wounds in the alien flagship. The outcome of the entire battle might depend on this single combat between capital ships. War Admiral Thysera finally gave the order to retreat as her fleet casualties mounted beyond acceptable levels. More than half her ships had been destroyed or crippled while the human losses remained minimal. The Zephyrian Empire had suffered its worst defeat in over 1,000 years at the hands of a supposedly primitive species. The surviving alien ships fled into hyperspace, while the human fleet remained in control of the battlefield. Admiral Phillips surveyed the wreckage of what had been the most powerful Zephyrian battle fleet and realized that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted forever. Humanity had proven that creativity and adaptability could triumph over technological superiority and ancient tactical wisdom. The news of humanity's victory at Kepler Station spread through the galaxy faster than the fastest starships. In the crystal cities of the Christech hegemony, silicon-based beings who prided themselves on logical thinking gathered around data terminals to analyze human battle recordings. Their mathematical minds struggled to understand how such chaotic tactics could defeat the precise formations of the Zephyrians. High processor ZIX-9 requested complete combat data from the human government through diplomatic channels. The Christek had spent thousands of years perfecting warfare based on mathematical models and computer predictions. The idea that unpredictable behavior could be more effective than logical planning challenged everything they believed about military science. On the nomadic fleet ships of the Vorthon clans, warrior poets studied the human tactics with growing admiration. The Vorthons were known throughout the galaxy for their hit-and-run fighting style that emphasized mobility and adaptability over heavy firepower. They recognized in human warfare a kindred spirit that valued flexibility over rigid doctrine. Clan leader Keth Shadowdancer sent a message to Admiral Phillips proposing an alliance between the Vorthon clans and humanity. The nomads offered to share their knowledge of deep space navigation and stealth technology in exchange for human tactical innovations. The proposal marked the first time in centuries that the Vorthons had sought a formal alliance with any species. Captain Jake Morrison found himself promoted to admiral and assigned to establish a new training facility for human fleet commanders. The Defiant became the centerpiece of a program designed to teach other captains the principles of adaptive warfare. Jake struggled with the irony that he was now supposed to teach tactics that were based on not following traditional tactical thinking. Lisa Bryant led a team of engineers in developing new ship designs based on lessons learned from the Defiant. The hybrid approach of combining technologies from multiple alien civilizations produced vessels that exceeded the performance of their individual components. Human shipyards began producing battlecruisers that looked like collections of spare parts, but fought with deadly effectiveness. Dr. Peter Grant's research team made another breakthrough when they realized that human creativity extended beyond military applications. The same mental flexibility that allowed humans to develop unpredictable tactics also let them integrate alien technologies in ways their original designers never intended. This ability to create hybrid solutions became known as the human factor in galactic scientific circles. The political landscape of the galaxy began to shift as species that had been dominated by the Zephyrians for centuries saw new possibilities. The Aquatic Collective sent delegations to human space offering to share their advanced sensor technologies in exchange for protection from insect raiders. The methane breathers of the Outer Rim requested human military advisors to help defend their gas giant colonies. Ambassador Helen Price found herself at the center of a diplomatic revolution as more species sought relationships with humanity. The galactic coalition that had existed for thousands of years with the Zephyrians as the dominant military power now had to accommodate humanity as a major player. Trade agreements that had favored the insects for centuries came up for renegotiation. Helen worked 18-hour days trying to establish new relationships while maintaining humanity's independence. The temptation was strong to simply replace the Zephyrians as the galaxy's dominant military power, but Helen understood that such an approach would eventually lead to the same conflicts that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. War Admiral Thyssera returned to Zephyrian space in disgrace with the remnants of her once mighty fleet. The loss of over half her ships to a supposedly inferior enemy marked the end of her military career. More importantly, it shattered the myth of Zephyrian invincibility that had kept dozens of species in line for thousands of years. Hive General Zakth faced growing unrest throughout the insect empire as news of the defeat spread. Species that had paid tribute to the Zephyrians for generations began to question whether continued submission was necessary. Some systems declared independence, while others simply stopped sending the resources that kept the insect war machine functioning. In the ancient energy realms beyond normal space, the ethereal collective took notice of human activities for the first time in eons. The energy beings had existed since before most current species evolved, and considered themselves the true rulers of the galaxy. They had allowed younger races to fight among themselves, as long as none threatened the established cosmic order. Ethereal. Prime Vash Eternal called for a gathering of the collective's highest minds to discuss the human situation. The energy beings possessed technology far beyond anything used by matter-based species, including the ability to phase through solid objects and weapons that could manipulate space and time itself. They had never been seriously challenged by any physical species. The ethereal analysis of human behavior revealed something that concerned the energy beings. Humans showed no respect for established galactic hierarchies and seemed determined to reshape interstellar relationships according to their own values. This rebellious attitude could spread to other species and threaten the stability that the ethereals had maintained for millions of years. Admiral Morrison received reports from human intelligence services about unusual activity in unexplored regions of space. Ships of unknown design had been detected near the borders of human territory, but they vanished whenever human vessels approached to investigate. The sensor readings were unlike anything in the databases of known alien technologies. Jake consulted with Dr. Grant about the mysterious contacts. The scientist's analysis of the limited sensor data suggested that the unknown ships might be using some form of dimensional phase technology that allowed them to exist partially outside normal space. Such technology was theoretically possible, but required energy sources beyond anything known to galactic civilization. Lisa Bryant began modifying the Defiance sensors to detect phase-shifted objects after studying Dr. Grant's theoretical models. The work was purely experimental since no one had ever built equipment to track targets that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The engineering challenges were enormous, but Lisa had learned to enjoy solving impossible problems. Ryan Cole worked with Amy Foster to develop new tactical doctrines for fighting enemies that could phase in and out of normal space. Traditional weapons would be useless against targets that could become intangible at will. The solution would require completely new approaches to warfare that went beyond anything humans had attempted. The galactic situation continued to evolve as more species broke away from Zephyrian control. The methane breathers formed a defensive alliance with the aquatic collective, while the Christek hegemony declared neutrality and focused on studying human tactical innovations. Only the most loyal insect client species remained under Zephyrian authority. Admiral Phillips found herself commanding a fleet that had grown from 43 ships to over 200. As more human vessels were completed using hybrid technology, the new battlecruisers incorporated lessons learned from multiple alien civilizations while maintaining the unpredictable creativity that had made human tactics so effective. The Defiant led a patrol group along the edge of known space when sensors detected the largest concentration of unknown ships yet encountered. More than 50 vessels of the mysterious design appeared briefly on long-range scanners before vanishing again. Jake realized that humanity was about to face a new enemy that made the Zephyrians look primitive by comparison. Dr. Grant's team worked frantically to analyze the sensor data from the encounter. The unknown ships displayed technology that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics. They could appear and disappear at will, move faster than light without using hyperspace, and seemed to be immune to conventional detection methods. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant and stared at the star charts showing the locations of mysterious ship contacts. The pattern suggested that unknown forces were surrounding human space in preparation for some kind of major action. Whatever species controlled the phase-shifting vessels was positioning itself for a confrontation with humanity. The victory at Kepler Station had established humanity as a major galactic power, but it had also attracted the attention of forces that preferred the old order. The ethereal collective had decided that human influence had grown too quickly and needed to be contained before it could spread further. The real test of human adaptability and creativity was about to begin against enemies whose technology seemed like magic compared to conventional science. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded a battle group of 20 human ships as they approached the edge of ethereal space, where the final confrontation would take place. The Defiant had been upgraded with every modification that Lisa Bryant could devise, but Jake wondered if human technology would be enough against enemies who could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. The ethereal collective had assembled a coalition of species loyal to the old galactic order. Ancient races that had served as intermediaries between the energy beings and younger civilizations now gathered their fleets in support of their masters. Ships from a dozen different worlds moved in perfect synchronization under ethereal guidance. Ethereal. Prime Vash Eternal manifested in normal space for the first time in 1,000 years, as a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field. The ancient creature had existed since before most stars were born and possessed knowledge that made other species seem like children. It regarded the approaching human fleet with something that might have been curiosity. Jake received a transmission from the ethereal entity that bypassed his ship's communication systems and spoke directly into his mind. The voice was like listening to the music of dying stars and carried meanings that human language could barely express. Vash Eternal offered humanity a choice between submission and destruction. The energy being explained that the galactic order had been carefully maintained for millions of years through a delicate balance of power. Young species were allowed to develop and fight among themselves as long as they eventually accepted their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Humanity's refusal to acknowledge superior authority threatened the stability of known space. Admiral Morrison listened to the ethereal ultimatum and felt the weight of speaking for his entire species. The energy beings offered humanity a place in the galactic order, but only as servants to their ancient wisdom. Human creativity and independence would be channeled into acceptable forms that supported, rather than challenged, existing power structures. Jake's response was broadcast on all frequencies so that every ship in both fleets could hear his words. Humanity rejected the offer of subordination and chose to fight for the right to determine its own destiny among the stars. The decision meant war against enemies whose technology seemed beyond the reach of physical science. The battle began when ethereal ships phased into normal space around the human fleet and opened fire with weapons that distorted reality itself. Space twisted and curved as energy beams that existed in multiple dimensions struck human vessels. Several ships simply ceased to exist as their molecular bonds were unraveled by forces that operated outside conventional physics. Lisa Bryant watched her instruments go crazy as the Defiant's sensors tried to track enemies that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The engineering systems that had been designed to integrate alien technologies were overwhelmed by readings that violated basic scientific principles. She began shutting down systems that were overloading from exposure to impossible energies. Ryan Cole's tactical computers crashed repeatedly as they tried to calculate firing solutions for targets that could phase in and out of existence at will. Traditional weapons were useless against enemies that could become intangible whenever they chose. The pattern recognition software that had been so effective against the Zephyrians was meaningless when dealing with beings who existed outside normal causality. Amy Foster discovered that ethereal phase technology operated on quantum frequencies that seemed to respond to conscious thought rather than electronic signals. Her communication equipment detected strange harmonics that fluctuated in patterns that matched human brainwave activity. The realization gave her an idea that seemed impossible, but might be their only chance. Dr. Nancy Webb had joined the Defiant's crew as the ship's psychologist to help manage the stress of experimental combat missions. Her background in human consciousness research became critically important when Amy showed her the correlation between ethereal phase frequencies and mental activity. Nancy proposed that human neural patterns might be able to disrupt alien dimensional technology. The breakthrough came when Nancy realized that ethereal phase shifts required quantum coherence that could be disrupted by the natural chaos of human emotional states. The energy beings existed in states of perfect order that made them vulnerable to the random neural activity generated by organic brains experiencing strong emotions. Jake ordered all human crews to implement Nancy's experimental protocol. Instead of trying to fight logically against impossible enemies, the humans would use their emotional intensity and creative chaos to disrupt ethereal quantum systems. Meditation techniques and focused emotion exercises became weapons in a battle that defied every rule of conventional warfare. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Ethereal ships began flickering between dimensions as their phase technology became unstable. Human crews focused on memories of home, feelings of determination, and their refusal to surrender their freedom. The emotional energy generated by 8,000 human minds created quantum interference that the energy beings could not compensate for. Lisa Bryant reported that the Defiant's hybrid systems were responding to the quantum chaos by adapting in ways she had never seen before. Human creativity combined with alien technology in the presence of disrupted spacetime was producing effects that nobody understood, but that clearly gave them an advantage over their enemies. ethereal prime Vash Eternal found itself unable to maintain coherent existence as human emotional energy disrupted the quantum fields that sustained its consciousness. The ancient being had never encountered a species that could weaponize their own mental chaos in such an effective way. For the first time in eons, the ethereal collective faced an enemy they could not simply overwhelm with superior technology. The battle turned as more ethereal ships lost their ability to phase and became vulnerable to human weapons. Jake ordered his fleet to press the attack while the enemy was confused. Railgun projectiles and missile warheads found targets that moments before had been untouchable. The coalition forces that supported the ethereals began to withdraw as they realized their ancient masters were not invincible. Ryan Cole's computers came back online as the quantum interference stabilized the local space-time enough for normal physics to function. His targeting systems locked onto ethereal vessels that were trapped in normal space and unable to escape. The human fleet poured concentrated fire into enemies that had never experienced the vulnerability of physical existence. Amy Foster maintained the quantum disruption by coordinating the emotional focus of all human crews through the fleet communication network. 8,000 people thinking about freedom, creativity, and their refusal to bow to ancient authority created a psychic weapon that no civilization had ever developed before. The final phase of the battle came when Vash Eternal attempted to restore ethereal quantum coherence by sacrificing its individual existence to stabilize the collective consciousness. Jake realized that the energy being was preparing to merge with its flagship in a desperate attempt to maintain phase capability. The Defiant moved to intercept before the process could be completed. Lisa Bryant pushed the ship's hybrid systems beyond all safety limits as the Defiant charged directly toward the ethereal flagship. Human engineering combined with alien technology and quantum chaos created a vessel that existed partially outside normal reality. The Battlecruiser became a weapon that could strike at enemies in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The collision between the Defiant and the ethereal flagship occurred in normal space and several other dimensions at once. The impact disrupted the quantum merge process and scattered Vash Eternal's consciousness across multiple reality layers. The ancient being that had existed for millions of years was destroyed by the sheer unpredictability of human determination. With their prime consciousness destroyed, the remaining ethereal forces lost cohesion and began to fade back to their energy realm. The coalition species that had supported them scattered to their home systems rather than face human forces that had proven capable of destroying beings they had considered godlike. Admiral Morrison stood on the damaged bridge of the Defiant and watched the enemy fleet disappear into dimensions beyond human understanding. The battle had been won through a combination of human creativity, adaptive technology, and the simple refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy would never be the same after witnessing the fall of its oldest rulers. 6 months later, Jake watched construction crews putting the finishing touches on a new generation of human starships. The vessels incorporated lessons learned from fighting Zephyrians, Ethereals, and a dozen other species. Each ship was unique because human engineers refused to be limited by conventional design principles. The galaxy had entered a new era where ancient hierarchies gave way to cooperative relationships based on mutual respect rather than dominance. Species that had been enemies for millennia began working together on projects that benefited everyone. The human example of adaptive creativity inspired others to question old assumptions about what was possible. Dr. Grant's research facilities expanded to include scientists from dozens of different worlds who came to study human approaches to problem solving.